A ruthless biker kicked a cat for fun, unaware that it belonged to Tom Hanks. What started as a petty act of cruelty spiraled into a war against a powerful gang with secrets buried deep in the city's underworld. Now, Tom faces a choice: walk away or fight back. But here's the thing, Tom Hanks doesn't back down. Subscribe now and turn on notifications so you don't miss this incredible story. The afternoon sun bathed San Francisco in golden hues, casting long shadows along the bustling streets. A light breeze carried the scent of fresh coffee and warm pastries from nearby cafes, creating a sense of calm amidst the usual city chaos. Amidst it all, Tom Hanks strolled leisurely, enjoying a rare moment of peace. But he wasn't alone. A sleek black cat with striking green eyes padded beside him, moving gracefully with an air of quiet confidence. His name was Salem, a fiercely independent yet loyal companion who had been by Tom's side for years. Unlike most cats, Salem didn't fear the streets or the crowds. He walked with purpose, matching Tom's pace like an old friend. Tom had rescued Salem years ago, finding him abandoned in a dark alley during a film shoot. Since then, the two had been inseparable. Tom wasn't just his owner, he was his protector, his family. As they reached Lucy's Cafe, a cozy little corner shop Tom frequented, the barista greeted him with a knowing smile. "The usual, Tom? You know me too well, Lucy." Tom took a seat at an outdoor table, scratching Salem behind the ears as the cat purred contentedly. But their peaceful moment was abruptly interrupted by the roar of motorcycles. A gang of bikers rumbled down the street, their leather jackets and roaring engines turning heads as they pulled up in front of a bar across the road. The group carried an aura of intimidation, rough, unwelcoming, and loud. Their jackets bore the emblem of a snarling tiger with extended claws, a symbol that felt as menacing as their presence. Tom barely paid them any mind at first. He wasn't one to judge people by their appearances. But then, something happened that changed everything. One of the bikers, a towering, tattooed brute with a shaved head, hopped off his motorcycle and stretched his neck. His sharp gaze suddenly landed on Salem, who had curiously strayed a few feet away from Tom's side. The man sneered, "Oh no, I hate cats." Before Tom could react, the biker swung his boot with cruel force. The impact sent Salem flying. The cat let out a sharp, agonized yowl as he hit the pavement, rolling over before coming to a trembling stop. The entire street fell silent. People at the cafe froze. Passers-by stared in shock. Even some of the biker's own crew looked momentarily taken aback. Tom Hanks didn't move at first. He simply stood, his face unreadable, his mind struggling to process what had just happened. Then, something inside him snapped. He stepped forward. His voice, usually warm and reassuring, came out cold and sharp as steel. "What the hell did you just do?" The biker scoffed, clearly amused. "Relax, old man. It's just a damn cat. It'll live." Tom felt an unfamiliar heat rise in his chest. He wasn't a violent man. He wasn't prone to anger. But this was beyond cruelty. The biker took a step closer, grinning mockingly. "What are you gonna do about it, huh?" Tom met his gaze with an intensity that wiped the smirk off the man's face. And in that moment, he made a decision that would change everything. And then, he made the decision that would change everything. If you love thrilling stories, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss out. The air in San Francisco's North Beach district carried the scent of freshly baked bread, sea salt, and the faint aroma of espresso from the many cafes lining the streets. The neighborhood was a vibrant mix of history and modernity. Cobblestone streets met neon lights, and vintage bookstores stood beside high-end boutiques. Tom Hanks had always loved this part of the city. It had an old soul, a sense of timeless charm, and on most days, it felt like a safe haven. But today, that feeling was gone. After the violent kick that sent Salem crashing onto the pavement, the peaceful hum of North Beach had collapsed into silence. The outdoor cafe, once lively with conversation and clinking coffee cups, now felt frozen in time. People sat motionless, their faces pale with shock. Even the passing pedestrians, usually too busy to pay attention to anything but their own hurried lives, had stopped in their tracks. The only sound was the soft, pained whimper from Salim as he struggled to stand. His small body trembled, his sharp green eyes filled with confusion and hurt. And, standing a few feet away, the biker, the towering tattooed brute with a shaved head, let out a scoff, completely unfazed. Tom's fingers curled into fists at his sides. A part of him wanted to lunge forward, to grab this man by the collar and demand an explanation. But another part, the more calculated and controlled part of him, forced him to pause and assess. Because this wasn't just one reckless man, this was an entire group. Across the street, outside the biker bar known as the Rusted Fang, a half-dozen motorcycles gleamed under the afternoon sun. The gang members loitered near their bikes, their rough laughter and cigarette smoke curling into the air. Their jackets all bore the same snarling tiger emblem, their boots scuffed from years of street brawls. They weren't just troublemakers. They were the kind of men who thrived on intimidation. Tom's instincts, honed through decades of experience reading people, told him that this situation could spiral out of control fast. He crouched down beside Salim, his hands moving carefully as he checked the cat's ribs, feeling for any signs of broken bones. Salim let out a low, wounded meow, his tail flicking weakly. He was hurt, but not broken. Tom exhaled through his nose, steadying himself. Then he stood, slowly, deliberately. He turned to face the biker, the brute, a man whose presence carried the weight of someone used to getting away with things, smirked. "What's the problem, old man?" he taunted. "You gonna cry over your little furball?" A murmur rippled through the cafe. People exchanged nervous glances, sensing the storm brewing. Tom didn't answer right away. Instead, he studied the man. He took in every detail, the calloused knuckles, the scar over his left eyebrow, the subtle tension in his stance. He wasn't just some random thug. He was a fighter, someone who had been in more than his share of back alley brawls. Tom Hanks wasn't a violent man, but he wasn't a fool either. So, when he finally spoke, his voice was calm, but cold. "You made a mistake." The biker chuckled, taking a step forward. "Oh yeah? And what are you gonna do about it?" The street felt smaller, as if the very air had thickened. The other bikers had noticed what was happening. Some of them watched with curious amusement, while others leaned against their motorcycles, arms crossed, waiting to see how things played out. Across the street, the neon sign of the Rusted Fang flickered, its red glow casting a menacing hue over the sidewalk. The bar was infamous in North Beach, a known gathering spot for outlaws, ex-cons, and men with nothing to lose. Tom was outnumbered, but he wasn't outmatched. Because what this man didn't realize was that Tom Hanks had something far more dangerous than fists. He had influence, and the entire city of San Francisco loved him. Lucy, the cafe's waitress, broke the tension first. She stepped out from behind the counter, her eyes flashing with anger. "Hey, you can't just attack someone's pet like that," she snapped, her voice sharper than usual. "Get out of here before I call the cops." The biker turned his head slowly toward her, his expression darkening. "That's so?" he said, stepping toward her now. "And what are you gonna do about it, sweetheart?" Lucy faltered, but before she could take a step back, Tom's voice cut through the air. "Touch her, and you'll regret it." There was no bravado in his tone, no theatrics, just a quiet certainty that froze the biker in place. Something about the way Tom said it, so steady, so sure, sent a ripple through the street. And then it happened. People started to move. Customers at the cafe stood up from their tables. Pedestrians along the sidewalk paused their phone calls. A nearby street vendor, an elderly Italian man who had been selling roasted chestnuts at the same corner for 20 years, folded his arms and gave the biker a hard glare. Tom wasn't just any man. He was Tom Hanks, and San Francisco had his back. The biker realized it too late. The air had shifted. The numbers weren't in his favor anymore. For the first time since the incident, a flicker of uncertainty crossed his face. He glanced around, realizing that the entire block was watching him now. He clicked his tongue, shaking his head. "This ain't over," he muttered. Then, with a dismissive wave, he turned on his heel and strode back toward his gang. Tom didn't stop him. He had already won, because he knew one thing for sure: this wasn't over. As the gang roared away on their motorcycles, the tension in the air finally broke. Lucy exhaled loudly. "Holy hell," she muttered. "That was intense." Tom crouched back down, gently lifting Salem into his arms. The cat was still trembling, but his green eyes were alert. "He's okay," Tom said, more to himself than anyone else. "He's a fighter." Lucy hesitated, then said, "You should take him to a vet, just to be sure." Tom nodded, and just as he was about to thank her, a soft buzzing sound made him pause. His phone vibrated in his pocket. He pulled it out and checked the screen. An unknown number. He answered cautiously. Tom Hanks speaking. A low voice crackled on the other end. "You should have stayed out of it, Hanks." Tom froze. His grip on the phone tightened. "Who is this?" Click. The line went dead. Tom exhaled slowly, his mind racing. He lifted his gaze, looking down the street where the bikers had disappeared. This wasn't just about Salem anymore. Something much bigger was coming, and he wasn't about to back down. But there was one thing nobody had noticed, until it was too late. If you're hooked on this story, hit the like button and share it with your friends so they don't miss out on what happens next. The roar of the motorcycles had long faded, but the tension still hung thick in the air. Tom Hanks stood outside Lucy's cafe, cradling Salem gently in his arms. The cat's breathing had steadied, though his small body still trembled from the shock of what had happened. Tom ran a careful hand over Salem's sleek black fur, checking again for any signs of serious injury. No broken bones, no visible wounds, just fear. Fear. It was an emotion Tom understood all too well. He looked down the street where the bikers had disappeared and took a deep breath, forcing himself to stay calm. Not because he wasn't angry. He was. But anger was a dangerous thing if you let it cloud your judgment. And Tom Hanks had learned the hard way that controlled anger was far more powerful than blind rage. Most people knew Tom Hanks as the warm, kind-hearted Hollywood star, the man who brought joy to millions, played beloved characters, and carried an effortless charm that made the world feel lighter. But what people didn't know, what they never saw, was the man behind all of it. The man who had endured things that no script could capture. The man who had been tested. Decades before he was a Hollywood legend, Tom had been just a kid trying to survive in a broken home. His father had left when he was young, and his mother, though loving, had struggled to raise 4 children alone. Money had been tight. Stability had been a fantasy, and moving from city to city had made it impossible to ever feel truly safe. But Tom had learned something valuable from those difficult years. He had learned that power didn't always come from fists. He had watched too many people solve their problems with violence. Kids at school, men in the neighborhood, even some of the teachers who thought intimidation was the same as respect. And Tom had made a choice. He would never be the strongest man in the room, but he would always be the smartest. He had honed his ability to read people, to understand their motivations, to see 10 steps ahead in any conflict. He learned that words, used correctly, were more dangerous than weapons. That was how he had survived. That was how he had won battles without ever throwing a punch. And today, standing in the middle of a street in San Francisco, holding his wounded cat, he knew this was one of those battles. Because what had happened wasn't random. That biker, the one who had kicked Salem, hadn't done it just for fun. There was something else behind it. Tom could feel it. And that phone call, the one from the unknown number with the chilling warning, confirmed it. He needed to figure out what the hell was really going on. Tom looked back at Lucy, who was still standing outside the cafe. Her arms were crossed, but her fingers were trembling slightly. She had been scared too. The people around them, pedestrians, cafe customers, even the elderly street vendor, had returned to their routines, but their eyes lingered on Tom. They were waiting to see what he would do. He could just walk away. It would be the easiest thing, but easy had never been his way. He had spent his entire life playing men who never walked away, and it wasn't just acting, it was who he was. That biker had threatened him, had hurt Salem, had terrorized this neighborhood for who knows how long. And now Tom had a reason to fight back. He turned back to Lucy. "Do you know who they are?" he asked, his voice steady. She hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, they call themselves the Iron Fangs. Small-time gang, but they're dangerous. They've been pushing local businesses around for months now, extorting money, picking fights, making people feel unsafe." Tom absorbed the information, his mind working like a chessboard. "And the Rusted Fang?" he asked, glancing at the biker bar down the street. Lucy sighed. "That's their base. The owner doesn't do much to stop them. Some people say he's in on it." Tom nodded slowly. Everything clicked into place. This wasn't just a bunch of reckless bikers looking for trouble. This was about control. The Iron Fangs weren't just hanging around the neighborhood for fun. They were claiming it. And now that Tom had stood up to them, he had put himself directly in their crosshairs. Good, because he had no intention of backing down. Tom turned his attention back to Salem. The cat had stopped shaking, his breathing steadier now. He looked up at Tom, his green eyes sharp, as if silently saying, "I'm still here." Tom's chest tightened. Salem wasn't just a pet. He was family. He had been there through Tom's lowest moments, when Hollywood had turned its back on him, when scripts had dried up, when the pressure of fame had nearly crushed him. And now it was Tom's turn to be there for him. "Come on, buddy," he murmured. "Let's get you checked out." He turned to Lucy. "Is there a vet nearby?" Lucy nodded quickly. 3 blocks down. Take a left. Dr. Harlow's clinic." Tom gave her a grateful nod and started walking. But as he moved through the streets, holding Salem close, he couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Because the Iron Fangs had made a mistake today. They thought they had just messed with some guy and his cat. They didn't realize they had messed with Tom Hanks. And just when he thought things couldn't get worse, they did. The walk to Dr. Harlow's veterinary clinic should have been simple. Just 3 blocks down, a left turn, and a short stretch before reaching the small family-run practice. But Tom Hanks knew better. He could feel it. The subtle weight of eyes on him, the unnatural silence in moments when the city should have been buzzing. Someone was watching him, and it wasn't just curiosity from pedestrians recognizing a Hollywood actor walking down the street with a cat in his arms. This was something else, something dangerous. The bell above the door chimed softly as Tom stepped into Harlow's veterinary clinic. The waiting room was small but clean, with the usual scent of antiseptic and pet dander lingering in the air. A receptionist looked up from the front desk, her eyes widening slightly in recognition. "Oh, Mr. Hanks," she said, momentarily startled. Tom gave her a polite smile, but his focus remained on Salem, who was curled tightly against his chest. The cat's green eyes were half-lidded, and his breathing, though steady, still carried an edge of discomfort. My cat was kicked by someone," Tom said, his tone calm but firm. "I need Dr. Harlow to check him out." The receptionist nodded quickly. "Of course. Let me take you straight back." She led Tom through a short hallway into an exam room where Dr. Harlow, a middle-aged man with graying hair and a kind but weary face, was already waiting. The vet wasted no time. "Let's get him on the table," he said gently. Tom carefully placed Salem onto the metal examination surface, keeping a reassuring hand on him. The cat let out a soft, tired meow, shifting slightly as Dr. Harlow began his assessment. The vet palpated Salim's ribs, checked his breathing, and ran his hands over the cat's spine with experienced precision. After a few moments, he exhaled in relief. No fractures, No internal bleeding, Dr. Harlow confirmed. He's sore, but lucky. Tom let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. So he'll be okay? Yes, but I'd like to keep him for a few hours, just for observation. We'll give him some fluids, a mild painkiller, and monitor his vitals. Tom nodded. He trusted the vet. But something still felt wrong. That sense of being watched hadn't left him. It was still there, outside these walls. Waiting. Tom stepped back into the waiting room, his mind racing. He pulled out his phone and scrolled to his contacts list. He needed to call someone. Not the police. Not yet. Someone who could give him information before he made his next move. But before he could dial, the bell above the clinic door chimed again. A man in a dark leather jacket stepped inside. Tall, broad shoulders, short, graying hair, a face hardened by time but sharp as a knife. Tom's fingers instinctively tightened around his phone because he recognized this man, Detective Evan Cole. Not a cop anymore, not for years, but still one of the most connected men in San Francisco. Cole's sharp gaze met Tom's and he nodded slightly, a silent acknowledgement before he stepped forward. "We need to talk," Cole said, his voice low. Tom's jaw clenched. "I figured," he replied. The detective motioned toward the door. "Not here. Walk with me." Tom followed Cole out onto the sidewalk. The afternoon sun was beginning to dip lower, casting long shadows across the city streets. The two men walked in tense silence for a moment before Cole finally spoke. "You shouldn't have done that." Tom exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "Done what?" "Stood up for my cat." Cole didn't smile. "Stood up to them." Tom stopped walking. "The Iron Fangs," he said, testing the name. Cole nodded. "They're not just some low-level street gang, Tom. They've got connections. A pipeline of money coming from somewhere. Not just extortion, but real illegal operations." Tom crossed his arms, processing. "So, what are you telling me? That I should have let that guy get away with kicking Salem?" Cole sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. "No, I'm saying that now. You're on their radar, and they don't let things go." Tom's mind flashed back to the unknown caller on his phone. "You should have stayed out of it, Hanks." This was bigger than he thought. Cole glanced around, lowering his voice. "Listen to me. You've got two choices. Either you lay low and let this blow over, or you push back before they make their next move." Tom knew what laying low meant. It meant watching over his shoulder, waiting for an attack that would come when he least expected it. That wasn't who he was. Tom looked at Cole, his expression unreadable. "I need information," he said. Cole studied him for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Fine. Meet me at the pier in an hour. I'll tell you what you need to know." And with that, Cole turned and disappeared into the crowd. Tom stood there for a moment, hands in his pockets, staring down the street. Somewhere in the distance, a motorcycle engine rev, a sound that was beginning to feel like a warning bell. This wasn't over. Not even close. But what Tom didn't realize was that the Iron Fangs had already made their next move. The city lights flickered on as Tom Hanks made his way toward the pier, the smell of salt water mixing with the distant scent of street food from the boardwalk. The sounds of the city, car horns, the chatter of tourists, the occasional seagull, felt strangely distant. His mind was focused on one thing. What the hell had he gotten himself into? Salem was safe at the vet for now, but the threat hanging over him hadn't disappeared. If anything, it was growing, and Detective Evan Cole held the answers. Tom spotted Cole standing near the edge of the pier, hands stuffed into the pockets of his worn leather jacket, his face shadowed under the glow of a dim street lamp. The detective barely looked up as Tom approached. "You weren't followed?" Cole asked. Tom raised an eyebrow. "Should I have been?" Cole exhaled through his nose, nodding toward a nearby fishing boat bobbing gently in the water. "Come on, we're not talking out in the open." Tom hesitated. He didn't like this. The secrecy, the paranoia in Cole's voice. But he needed answers. So he followed, inside the small cabin of the fishing boat. The air was thick with the scent of oil and salt. Cole leaned against a wooden crate, crossing his arms. "You think this is about some biker kicking your cat?" he started. "It's bigger than that, Tom. Much bigger." Tom's jaw clenched. "Then start talking," Cole sighed. "The Iron Fangs aren't just a bunch of thugs terrorizing small businesses. They're a front, a piece of something larger. Someone is funding them, keeping them protected, and that someone doesn't want outsiders messing with their operation." Tom frowned. "Funding them for what?" Cole's expression darkened. "Drugs, smuggling, money laundering, and lately, they've been expanding, pushing into neighborhoods they didn't used to control. Someone big is behind it, and they're using the Fangs as enforcers." Tom exhaled sharply, piecing it together. The Iron Fangs weren't just causing chaos for fun. They were staking a claim, and anyone who resisted paid the price. And now, because of what had happened at Lucy's cafe, Tom was officially on their list. Cole leaned in slightly. "You made them look weak today. That's why you got that call. They're not gonna let that slide." Tom's mind flashed back to the unknown number, the chilling voice on the line. "You should have stayed out of it, Hanks." "So what's the play?" Tom asked, his voice calm but firm. Cole hesitated. "You need to walk away, Tom. This isn't your fight." Tom's gaze didn't waver. "It is now." Cole let out a heavy sigh, rubbing his temples. "I figured you'd say that." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn envelope. "I did some digging, and I found something you're not gonna like." Tom took the envelope cautiously, opening it to reveal a set of photographs. His stomach twisted, because in those photographs was someone he trusted, someone he never would have expected. Lucy, the waitress from the cafe, the one who had stood up for him, the one who had told him about the Iron Fangs in the first place. And here she was, caught in pictures, meeting with one of the gang's higher-ups in secret. Tom's grip tightened around the photos. "She's been working with them?" he asked, his voice low. Cole nodded. "Looks like it. We don't know why yet. Could be money, could be fear. But one thing's for sure, she's been feeding them information." Tom exhaled slowly, his mind racing. Was that why the Iron Fangs had targeted Salem so quickly? Had Lucy tipped them off about Tom being at the cafe? Was she playing both sides? Before Tom could process his next step, a loud explosion shattered the night. The entire boat rocked violently, the windows rattling from the force of the blast. Cole and Tom stumbled, bracing themselves against the walls. "What the hell was that?" Tom shouted. Cole yanked open the door, his face grim. "We need to go, now." Tom followed him onto the deck, and his breath caught. Because back on the pier, a car was engulfed in flames, and parked just beside it, a row of motorcycles. The Iron Fangs had arrived, and Tom Hanks realized they weren't just here for intimidation. They were here to finish what they started. If this story has you hooked, don't forget to like and share it so your friends can follow along. The explosion shockwave had barely faded when Tom Hanks and Detective Evan Cole moved. Instinct, experience, survival. The three things that had kept Tom alive in situations far less dangerous than this. Cole grabbed Tom's arm, dragging him toward the side of the boat. "We're sitting ducks here," he barked. "They'll box us in if we don't move." Tom's mind raced. The Iron Fangs weren't just sending threats anymore. They were here to finish this. He scanned the pier. A dozen bikers, all wearing those leather jackets with the snarling tiger emblem. Some stood by their bikes, watching the flames from the explosion like it was a work of art. Others were moving, spreading out, searching, looking for him. Cole pulled something from inside his jacket. A pistol, sleek and worn from use. Tom's heart pounded. "You came armed? I came prepared. Are we really doing this?" Cole checked the magazine, snapped it back into place, and gave Tom a look. They started it. Tom exhaled sharply. This was it. the breaking point. And Tom Hanks was done running. Cole was already calculating. He wasn't just a man with a gun. He was tactical. A former detective who had seen too many good people fall because they weren't ready for what was coming. He pointed to the side of the pier. "We don't take them head on. We move. Keep them guessing." Tom nodded. They jumped off the boat, landing on the wooden pier. The shadows covered them for now, but not for long. The iron fangs were closing in. Tom could hear their voices. "Find him. Check the docks. He doesn't leave here breathing." Tom clenched his fists. This wasn't just a bunch of punks playing gangster. This was war. And Tom had one advantage. The world saw him as the nice guy, the actor, the man who wouldn't fight back. But underestimating him was a mistake. Before they could move, a voice rang out from the other side of the pier. "Tom!" He spun toward the sound. Lucy. She stood near the edge of the docks, her hands raised, breathing heavy. Her eyes flicked between him and the gang. Cole's grip on his gun tightened. "She's working with them," he muttered. Tom's gut told him otherwise. Lucy's hands were shaking. Her face was too tense, too conflicted. If she was betraying him, she wasn't happy about it. "Tom, you have to go," she said quickly. "They're not here to scare you anymore. They're here to—" A hand grabbed her arm, jerking her back violently. The shaved-head brute, the same biker who had kicked Salem. "You talk too much," he growled. Lucy gasped in pain as he twisted her arm. And that was it. That was the moment Tom Hanks stopped thinking. That was the moment he moved. People forgot what acting really was. It wasn't just playing a character. It was reading people, understanding their weaknesses, knowing when to strike. Tom had spent decades mastering those skills. And now he was using them. He grabbed a wooden dock pole, yanking it free from the railing. A weapon? No, a tool. The biker barely had time to react before Tom swung. Fast, precise, controlled. The pole slammed into the man's wrist, forcing him to release Lucy. She stumbled back, clutching her arm, but Tom wasn't done. A second swing, this time to the knee. The biker went down hard, cursing through gritted teeth. Now the rest of the gang had noticed, and they were angry. Tom turned to Lucy. "Run, now!" She hesitated for half a second too long. "Go!" She bolted, and now it was just Tom and the iron fangs. Cole fired first. A warning shot. The bullet cracked into a wooden crate, sending splinters flying. The gang froze, their hands hovering near whatever weapons they carried. And that was all Tom and Cole needed. They moved. They weren't soldiers. They weren't killers. But they were smart. Tom grabbed the nearest stack of lobster traps, yanking them down, sending a wall of tangled metal crashing into the bikers. Cole pushed forward, using the confusion to close the distance. A fistfight broke out. Raw, fast, brutal. Tom dodged a swinging chain, ducked under a wild punch, and used his momentum to shove one of the gang members straight into the water. Another biker grabbed him from behind. Tom reacted on instinct. Elbow to the ribs, then a hard stomp to the foot. The grip loosened, just enough for Tom to throw him off. Cole was handling himself too, but there were too many of them. Tom turned and saw the leader stepping forward, the real danger. The shaved head brute stood up again, shaking off the pain. Blood dripped from his lip. His jaw was tight, but his eyes were burning. "You think this is over?" he sneered. Tom's grip tightened on the dock pole. "I think you should leave before you embarrass yourself anymore." The biker chuckled, a low, dangerous sound. "You don't get it, do you?" he said, stepping closer. "This isn't about you. It never was." Tom's muscles tensed. "Then what's it about?" The biker smiled. "It's about who's watching." Tom's breath caught. Before he could react, before he could even process the words, a second explosion tore through the pier. The explosion's shockwave had barely faded when Tom Hanks and Detective Evan Cole moved. Instinct, experience, survival. The three things that had kept Tom alive in situations far less dangerous than this. Cole grabbed Tom's arm, dragging him toward the side of the pier, boots slamming against the wooden planks. "We're sitting ducks here," he barked. "They'll box us in if we don't move." Tom's mind raced. The Iron Fangs weren't just sending threats anymore. They were here to finish this. He scanned the pier. A dozen bikers, all wearing those leather jackets with the snarling tiger emblem. Some swatching the flames from the explosion like it was a work of art. Others were moving, spreading out, searching, looking for him. Cole pulled something from inside his jacket. A pistol, sleek and worn from use. Tom's heart pounded. "No, you came armed?" "I came prepared. Are we really doing this?" Cole checked the magazine, snapped it back into place, and gave Tom a look. They started it. Tom exhaled sharply. This was it. The breaking point. And Tom Hanks was done running. Cole was already calculating. He wasn't just a man with a gun. He was tactical. A former detective who had seen too many good people fall because they weren't ready for what was coming. He pointed to the side of the pier. "We don't take them head on. We move. Keep them guessing." Tom nodded. They jumped off the boat, landing on the wooden pier. The shadows covered them for now, but not for long. The Iron Fangs were closing in. Tom could hear their voices. "Find him. Check the docks. He doesn't leave here breathing." Tom clenched his fists. This wasn't just a bunch of punks playing gangster. This was war. And Tom had one advantage. The world saw him as the nice guy, the actor, the man who wouldn't fight back. But underestimating him was a mistake. Before they could move, a voice rang out from the other side of the pier. "Tom!" He spun toward the sound. Lucy. She stood near the edge of the docks, her hands raised, breathing heavy. Her eyes flicked between him and the gang. Cole's grip on his gun tightened. "She's working with them," he muttered. Tom's gut told him otherwise. Lucy's hands were shaking. Her face was too tense, too conflicted. If she was betraying him, she wasn't happy about it. "Tom, you have to go," she said quickly. "They're not here to scare you anymore. They're here to—" A hand grabbed her arm, jerking her back violently. The shaved-head brute, the same biker who had kicked Salem. "You talk too much," he growled. Lucy gasped in pain as he twisted her arm. And that was it. That was the moment Tom Hanks stopped thinking. That was the moment he moved. People forgot what acting really was. It wasn't just playing a character. It was reading people, understanding their weaknesses, knowing when to strike. Tom had spent decades mastering those skills. And now he was using them. He grabbed a wooden dock pole, yanking it free from the railing. A weapon? No, a tool. The biker barely had time to react before Tom swung, fast, precise, controlled. The pole slammed into the man's wrist, forcing him to release Lucy. She stumbled back, clutching her arm, but Tom wasn't done. A second swing, this time to the knee. The biker went down hard, cursing through gritted teeth. Now the rest of the gang had noticed, and they were angry. Tom turned to Lucy. "Run, now!" She hesitated for half a second too long. "Go!" She bolted, and now it was just Tom and the Iron Fangs. Cole fired first. A warning shot. The bullet cracked into a wooden crate, sending splinters flying. The gang froze, their hands hovering near whatever weapons they carried. And that was all Tom and Cole needed. They moved. They weren't soldiers. They weren't killers. But they were smart. Tom grabbed the nearest stack of lobster traps, yanking them down, sending a wall of tangled metal crashing into the bikers. Cole pushed forward, using the confusion to close the distance. A fistfight broke out. Raw, fast, brutal. Tom dodged a swinging chain, ducked under a wild punch, and used his momentum to shove one of the gang members straight into the water. Another biker grabbed him from behind. Tom reacted on instinct. Elbow to the ribs, then a hard stomp to the foot. The grip loosened, just enough for Tom to throw him off. Cole was handling himself too, but there were too many of them. Tom turned and saw the leader stepping forward, the real danger. The shaved head brute stood up again, shaking off the pain. Blood dripped from his lip. His jaw was tight, but his eyes were burning. "You think this is over?" he sneered. Tom's grip tightened on the dog pole. "I think you should leave before you embarrass yourself anymore." The biker chuckled, a low, dangerous sound. "You don't get it, do you?" he said, stepping closer. "This isn't about you. It never was." Tom's muscles tensed. "Then what's it about?" The biker smiled. "It's about who's watching." Tom's breath caught. Before he could react, before he could even process the words, a second explosion tore through the pier. The second explosion rocked the pier, sending a fiery shockwave through the night. Tom Hanks barely had time to react before a wall of heat and debris knocked him backward. He hit the wooden planks hard, his ears ringing, his vision blurring for a second. Through the smoke and chaos, he saw Detective Cole struggling to his feet a few feet away, coughing. And then he saw them. The Iron Fangs weren't running. They were watching. The shaved head brute, the man who had kicked Salem, stood tall among his gang, his lips curled into a sneer. Because this wasn't just a random attack. This was a message. And then, out of the shadows, another figure stepped forward. A man in a gray suit, polished shoes, and an air of power that immediately set him apart from the bikers. Tom's stomach dropped. This wasn't about a gang war anymore. This was something far worse. The man in the suit stopped a few feet from Tom, tilting his head as if studying him. Then he smiled. "I have to admit," he said smoothly, "I didn't expect you to last this long." Tom wiped a streak of blood from his forehead, standing up straight. "I'm full of surprises." The man chuckled, hands in his pockets. "That you are." Cole stepped forward, still catching his breath. "Let me guess," he said, glaring at the man. "You're the one funding the Iron Fangs." The man turned his gaze to the detective, completely unfazed. "Not exactly." He motioned to the gang behind him. "They're just a useful tool, a means to an end." Tom felt a cold realization settle in. "Then what is the end?" The man's smile didn't fade. "Control." A beat of silence. Then he added, "And you, Mr. Hanks, got in the way." Tom's mind raced. This was never just about Salem. This was about power. The Iron Fangs were muscle for something much bigger. Organized crime, political corruption, something that had been festering in the city for years. And now, he had exposed them, not by fighting, not by outgunning them, but by refusing to back down. The man sighed, shaking his head. "You should have just walked away." Tom glanced at Cole. Cole nodded. Not gonna happen. Tom knew he had one last card to play, and he was about to use it. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, pressing a button before holding it up. The man in the suit frowned. "What are you doing?" Tom smiled. "Live streaming." The man's expression faltered. Then he heard it. The sound of sirens. The entire gang turned, because flashing red and blue lights were filling the night. And not just a few. All of them. Tom had called it in. Every cop in the city was now closing in. The Iron Fangs were trapped. And the man in the suit, his carefully built empire had just come crashing down. The chaos unraveled in seconds. The bikers panicked. Some tried to run, but it was too late. Police cars blocked the exits. Officers poured out, weapons drawn. Cole stepped forward, gun aimed at the leader. "On your knees." The shaved head brute hesitated. Then he saw the look in Tom's eyes, and he knew it was over. One by one, they surrendered. The man in the suit, he simply exhaled, straightened his jacket, and lifted his wrists. "Well played, Mr. Hanks." Then the cuff snapped shut. The next morning, Tom sat in Dr. Harlow's clinic. Salem curled in his lap. The cat's purring was strong again. He was going to be okay. Lucy sat nearby, her arm in a sling, her eyes tired but relieved. She had told them everything. She had been forced to work with the Iron Fangs, blackmailed into feeding them information. But when it mattered, she had chosen the right side. Tom scratched behind Salem's ear. "You really started something. "You know that," he murmured to the cat. Salem stretched lazily. Tom chuckled. Maybe the cat knew all along. That evening, Tom Hanks walked through San Francisco. Salem perched comfortably on his shoulder. The city felt different now, safer, stronger. The Iron Fangs were gone, their leader locked up, their operation dismantled, and all because one man refused to walk away. As Tom turned the corner, a familiar old street vendor, the one who had watched it all unfold, gave him a knowing nod. Tom nodded back. Then he smiled, because sometimes the good guys win after all. If you loved this story, hit like, share it, and subscribe for more.